to welcome all of you. However, due to an illness, she wasn't able to join us this evening. But I'm happy to be giving the opening remarks in her place. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is part of the treaty lands and the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. We are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Before beginning the forum, I have a few housekeeping items to review. Tonight's live caption is being facilitated by Nissan. If you would like to link to live stream the transcript to your own devices, please visit the registration table on the right side, and a Holland Bloorview representative will provide you with a link to live stream. Question submissions forms have been made available on all of the chairs, and if somebody is not using a chair, they can access the forms from our staff. We encourage you to submit questions for the candidates during the wait at the registration table. There will be staff at the table also who can provide assistance if you need it. Bathrooms are located down the hallway at the back of the room. And if you have any questions, just ask anybody who's wearing a green lanyard. A single stall is located just past the reception desk, and a multi-staff facility is down the hall to the right. Okay, so now we're done with the housekeeping. I would also like to thank the candidates who have agreed to participate in our event during this critical time in the election period. We have Sarah Flaminga representing the Green Party, and Gary Gladstone is representing the Liberal Party. We also have two candidates from Holland Bloorview's home riding, Don Valley West, Laura McDowell from the NDP, and Ian Ritchie of the People's Party of Canada. Welcome. We are also lucky to be among some of Canada's most prominent and renowned disability advocates, Rabia Kader and David Lepofsky. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us on a Wednesday evening. I appreciate that we all have busy schedules, and it can be difficult to get motivated to do anything in the evening other than to relax in the comfort of our homes at this time of the day. But sometimes there's something worth staying out late on a school night, and I'm humbled that all of you have made the choice to be a part of this important conversation. So thank you. On that note, I would also like to acknowledge and thank the March of Dimes, Community Living Toronto, and the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center for helping us promote this event and getting many of you here tonight. June 21st, 2019. It was a landmark day for over 6 million Canadians who live with a disability, and the many people and organizations that advocate on their behalf every day, Holland Bloorview included. The unanimous passing of Bill C-81 sent a strong message to Canadians with disabilities who have lived in a world that was not designed for them, and that is still not designed for them. They heard, they were seen, and we learned that there is a change on its way. But what we don't know yet is what exactly this change will look like. The only way that the ACA will be effective is if the people in power have strong and sincere implementation plans in place. And the only way to do this is to make sure people living with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities, and their families are actively involved in the equitable conversation. On October 21st, Canadians will decide who will lead our country for the next 4 years. The outcome of this election will undoubtedly impact how our country will move forward to implement new standards and laws that will move our society forward. it will create a society that's inclusive and barrier-free. I, for one, am grateful to have representation of almost all political parties here tonight, because it is through education, engagement, and platforms like this that impact is made and change can happen. I'm also interested, as are the rest of you, in learning more about their party's implementation plans as it relates to creating a barrier-free Canada for all, including those with a disability. As a person living with a disability and a long-time advocate for disability rights myself, I can spend the entire evening talking about the many obstacles I face, try to live in my community, and doing day-to-day things that others without a disability do. The barriers I encounter are countless and constant. My human potential is mostly limited due to inaccessibility around me, not due to my disability. Barriers at school, in the community, to employment, to access transportation, to name a few. For some, these challenges begin almost the moment they enter the world. Working at Holland Bloorview, I have the pleasure of hearing from many passionate and inspiring kids and youth about the challenges they encounter day to day and the dreams they have for an accessible Canada, where they want to live their lives with their full human potential. It's not much to ask. Tonight, you're going to hear from one of them, as well as other passionate advocates from the disability community about the current landscape and hope for the future. In a few moments, you're going to hear from Gabby, a Holland Bloorview Youth Ambassador, who will tell us about her experiences and what she hopes and accessibility will look like. Gabby is a grade 4 student and has been featured in our Dear Everybody campaign, an ambassador for the Walk for Muscular Dystrophy Canada, and the first female vault hockey player in the country. She also has Nimelin rod myopathy and wants everyone to know that people with disabilities are just like everyone else. So I would like all of you to welcome Gabby onto the stage.
Gabby has asked that to encourage everyone who is able to please read along her speech with her as she speaks it today on
From a child, we just wanted to be like every other child, go to school, play with friends, access the education just like everybody else does. It's nothing special. And you also heard from her a day in her school when the school is accessible, her disability goes away, but when it's inaccessible, her disability becomes something special that we're always asking society to accommodate. So accessibility really is very crucial for all human beings, with or without disabilities. So thank you, Gabby, for giving us that picture, visual pictures. And you have found a school not too far from home that is inclusive and that allow you to participate in all activities with your friends. Next we will hear from David Lepofsky. Mr. Lepofsky has a Master's of Law from Harvard Law School. He teaches at Osgood Hall and the University of Toronto, where he has served as a part-time member of the University of Toronto Faculty of Law for nearly 3 decades, a long-time supporter of the disability community. Mr. Lepofsky advocates for new laws to protect the rights of persons with disabilities in Canada, and currently chairs the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Alliance. In 2004, he was appointed to the position of General Counsel, the highest promotion in the Ontario Public Service. As lead of the ODA committee, Mr. Lepofsky successfully campaigned for 10 years to win passage of two new Ontario laws to make Ontario fully accessible to persons with disabilities. In addition to advocating at the provincial level, David has led successfully the AODA's advocacy efforts to secure the enactment of strong accessibility legislation at the federal level. And he was also instrumental in actually forcing amendments that will make the law more meaningful. He's an author and recipient of numerous awards and honorary doctorates. Please join me in welcoming David.
If you can't hear me, raise your hand. I hope you can notice anyway. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thanks for including me, and thanks to the candidates for taking part in this. Thanks to the organizers for pulling it all together. Yeah, it was exciting when we got a commitment after a great deal of campaigning, a lot of us, 4 years ago, for the enactment of a new national accessibility law. That didn't come from party platforms originally. It came from the grassroots of the disability rights movement. And it was exciting when a minister got appointed to lead it and said a lot of things that echoed what we were saying we needed. It was exciting when the bill first got introduced a year ago in June. But it was also important for us to take a realistic look at that bill. It was over 100 pages long, and yes, I and others had to read every last somewhat dry word of it. And in a nutshell, it was really strong on good intentions, but really weak on implementation and enforcement. To boil it down, it said that its goal is a barrier-free Canada, insofar as the federal government can address that. Air travel, postal service, banking, television, radio, internet, things like that. And that's great. But it did not require a single barrier to be removed ever. It's good that it provided for effective enforcement powers. That was really helpful. But it splintered them among fully 4 different federal agencies and left it for people with disabilities to have to scurry from one to the next, figuring out where to go, and then once they got to the right agency, you'd have to learn up to 4 different sets of procedures and rules just to present their case. That's absurdly complicated. It's good that it aimed to regulate travel where the federal government can do that, like air travel, but it's really bad that it gave responsibility for that to the Canadian Transportation Agency. That agency's had responsibility for regulating accessibility of air travel for decades. And frankly, its track record has been very poor. And to go back to the same agency with the same poor record and say, keep it up, is not going to lead to the kind of progress we need. And as well, it's useful for all of us to know that the federal government spends lots and lots of our money buying goods and services and subsidizing the construction of infrastructure, buildings, public transit, and so on across the country. But this bill does not require that those who get and use federal money may never use it to create a barrier against us. Canadians with disabilities need and deserve better. We took our case to the House of Commons, got a few amendments. The opposition parties pressed more, but many, if not most of those, were voted down. We and others, and I and my coalition worked collaboratively, the Accessibility Frontiers for Disabilities Act Alliance, collaboratively with others in the disability rights community that were like-minded in their desire to see this law strengthened. We went to the Senate. We got some amendments there that are helpful. And then we got the House of Commons, frankly, we collectively backed the House of Commons into approving those just before the election. So what we end up with is a bill that is helpful, but is nowhere near as strong as we need it to be. So what do? Well, we come to an all-candidates debate, and we ask the candidates a simple question. What will your party do to make this bill stronger and to ensure that it is effectively implemented? Now, the AODA Alliance, we wrote the party leaders of all the major parties over 2 months ago, on July 18th, listing 11 commitments we wanted to ensure this bill is strengthened. You can always amend it, make it better, and also to ensure that it is effectively implemented. We've written all the parties. Only one of the 6 major parties, the NDP, have answered us. Now, we're not partisan. We're not plugging for any party. Our goal is to get all the rest of them to do so. Now, assuming our candidates who are here from parties that haven't yet answered, assuming they don't have a mandate to answer on behalf of the party, if they do, we want to hear it. What we have as a question for them is one that I think is a fair one. Do you personally support strengthening this legislation and effectively implement it? And will you press your leader to promise to do so? Individual candidates can do that, even if their party is not yet on the record committing to do that. And that's what we ask tonight. But what else can we do? All of you can do 3 things. First, we need you to press your candidates, not only here, but when they knock on your door, or if you go to any other events, or if they phone you, and they're all phoning us, or even through social media. How do you do that? We've already put out an action kit with all the tips you need. How do you get that action kit? Go to our website, aodaalliance.org/Canada, and it's right there. Not only that, I'm pestering our friend Fred Weingast. He did such a great job helping pull this together, and he's promised he's going to email it to you tomorrow. Right, Fred? Tomorrow.
Yes.
Morning. It gives you everything you need to know. What else do you need to do? 2 other things. Any of you on Twitter? If you're not, you should all be on Twitter. And if you follow @AODA Alliance, yes, you can take your smartphone out now. I won't think it's rude. Take it out right now and follow @AODA Alliance. We are tweeting every candidate we can to ask for these pledges. And we're neutral. We're not picking any party. We're gonna tweet anyone we can. All you gotta do is retweet our tweets, because when you click retweet, you're saying, I want to know too. I also want these commitments. So follow @AODA Alliance and retweet our tweets. And if you don't know how to do it, ask your kids. Because they do know how to do it, and they'll say, Mom, Dad, just give me the phone and I'll do it for you. And what the heck, it's an education for them. Finally, learn more about our campaign for accessibility. Our main way to keep you informed of what to do, what you can do, and what's being done, what promises are being made, is through the email list that we maintain. And one of our fabulous supporters, Zinnia, wave, stand up, gesticulate, do something. She's got a pad. That's our political organizing tool. We want you to give us your email address, and we will sign you up for our updates. So if you want to just raise your hand or otherwise gesture to her, she'll come over now and get you to print your email. By the way, we do not raise money. We don't want your money. We won't pester you for money. Let me tell you this. You might well think, what can I do? I'm not going to go read a 117-page bill with complex language that even a guy like Mosky, who's a law professor, has trouble figuring out. And I'm not used to lobbying politicians and so on. What difference can I make? Well, just clicking retweet. Just following us and clicking retweet on our tweets to the candidates. That adds your voice to ours. Following the tips in our action kit. They're written for you, assuming you've never done this before and don't know what we're asking for. You just want more accessibility. It's all there. And we know from almost 25 years of doing this kind of advocacy, federally, recently, provincially, over that entire period, we know that in an election, politicians are most likely to sit forward and listen. So let's make them listen by making sure they hear not just about what the media is covering, but about the issues that matter to us. I look forward to hearing what the candidates have to say, and I'm going to help make sure they answer our questions. And I really look forward to you signing up for our updates and retweeting our tweets. Thank you all very much.
not only deliver their statements here, but also continue the work with their parties. And from your vision, we know that we all will be benefited. And I don't know if you noticed that this is our accessible podium. You can see me now. It's really, I wanted to show off. Okay. And next we will hear from Rabia Kader, human rights and accessibility expert. Rabia is a longtime friend and a community leader and a trailblazer dedicated to helping others address issues of fairness and justice for many marginalized groups, including persons with disabilities and women and people of color. She was recently appointed to the Canadian Accessibility Standards Development Organization Board of Directors, a newly formed government body tasked with developing and revising accessibility standards for federally regulated organizations, including the Government of Canada. She has also served as a commissioner for the Ontario Human Rights Commission. She's the Chief Executive Officer of Dean Support Services serving individuals with disabilities in Ontario and Executive Director of the Muslim Council of Appeals supporting not-for-profit organizations and charity. Ms. Kader is also co-founder of the Canadian Alliance on Race and Disability, the only organization which represents racialized individuals with disabilities and organizations. She is also a member of the Mississauga and Regional Key Accessibility Advisory Committees and a board member of the Federation of Muslim Women. Ms. Kader has received numerous awards for her humanitarian services, including a Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Medal. Please join me in welcoming Rabia.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me put out a disclaimer up front. The views and opinions expressed in the next few minutes are mine and mine alone and do not reflect any of those organizations named, friends, family members, etc., okay? They're only my opinions and probably not even aligned with David's opinions. I don't know. What David and I share in common is we are both blind and we are both advocates from various angles. My work has been deeply embedded at the grassroots level through my lived experience. My lived experience as a person with a disability and as an individual who has siblings with a range of disabilities. Having grown up here, I've had lots of access and opportunities, and yet that access and opportunities have certainly been infested with layers of barriers, complex barriers, as a result of my identity, my unique identity. So often when I speak, I introduce myself with a one-liner, and that one-liner goes something like this. Hi, I'm Rabia Kader. I'm a hyphen with many hijabs. I cover my hair, just for those that might not see how I'm dressed. I am a Muslim, Pakistani, Punjabi, or let me change that up. Muslim, Punjabi, Pakistani, Canadian woman, wife, mother, yada, 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 and an individual with a disability. I happen to be blind. And this whole package of me faces barriers and has accommodation needs and requires and demands accessibility. So I'm going to take it beyond legislation because David's the expert on legislation, and we wouldn't be here even discussing legislation if it wasn't for his pioneering advocacy from the time that our Charter of Rights and Freedoms was being formed to this day. I've read about him in textbooks. So what I want to talk about is taking it beyond. I want to see people taking it beyond the text of the law and the letter of the law to the intent that we need to cultivate, the intent that we want to see come to fruition. As grassroots communities, as racialized people with disabilities, as visible minorities by color, by religion, by gender, etc., who happen to have a disability too, we often find ourselves not present in spaces and places where policy formation happens, where consultations happen. Communities coming from diverse backgrounds that make this country whole are often not tapped into for their input, for their advice, for their lived experience and their lived realities. So the voices of people with disabilities are often partially reflected in the legislation that comes to fruition, in the standards that get developed, in the projects that get led to implement those standards. We are not present. Hence, we felt it was really important for us to form the Canadian Alliance on Race and Disability because we feel this conversation is limited, that our needs are even more complex, our barriers are multiplied. We face layers of disadvantage systemically across the board in accessing services, in accessing jobs, in accessing opportunities in this province and in this country. So my challenge today and moving forward to anyone seeking public office, to anyone charged with developing policy and standards, to anyone, including myself, engaged in the process, my challenge is that we must go beyond and voice the complex needs that result from intersecting identities. So the types of things that often we feel, we're talking about accessibility and transportation, we need to address yada yada, oftentimes we focus on the individual. Not all of us look at ourselves solely as the individual. We come from values and traditions that look at us as a collective unit. We as individuals have families. It is not just me, myself, and I. I'm a mother of 4 kids. And you know what? It's not easy if I required accessible transportation to pack them up into accessible transportation when they were young. Because there was no recognition that a mom with a disability could require that kind of accommodation and could have, for God's sake, 4 kids. How dare I? Beyond expectations. But, my joke is I had to have them for some of you to increase the population. Some people choose not to have or can't have or choose not to have as many as I did. I was competing with my mother and my mother-in-law. So the needs are diverse, the requirements are diverse, and they're not just needs, they're requirements. I learned from someone long time ago that we don't have special needs. We have requirements that should be addressed, that could be addressed, and that have to be addressed. Because our requirements raise the bar and ensure accessibility for everybody. And somebody's going to give me a time check here, right? Don't hold the card or fly. 4 more minutes? Okay. Well, as I said, legislation has historically, and if we look at our history, legislation has looked at bricks and mortar. Standards have looked at very specifics, let's say, very specific components. I've been involved at the local level on the implementation of legislation locally in certain sectors, and in those sectors I often find, again, that diversity is compartmentalized and equity work is compartmentalized separately from accessibility in places and spaces that you would think it should be going hand in hand. So I'm really pleased that at Holland Bloorview that the equity work is collective. It's happening. It's together, embedded deeply with inclusion work and accessibility work. EDI happens in many places, and accessibility is done in a silo. When I voice this in certain areas, I've been told, oh, you know, we have a diversity and inclusion committee and we have an accessibility committee. Well, we need to do some cross-learning here, cross-appointments here. And we've been told, oh no, we're doing the accessibility stuff. There's no need to have that at the table at the diversity and inclusion advisory committee level. And I'm like, okay, if we're not putting accessibility into the diversity and inclusion equation, then we're working in silos and we're not doing the high impact work that needs to be done to truly evolve change. So bringing this work together is important, ensuring that we're looking at the range of equity issues when we're looking at accessibility, that accessibility and equity work raises the bar on human rights or vice versa, but works hand in hand, ensuring that we are not just catering to the needs of traditional white male Canadians with disabilities, sorry David, but we are in fact looking at visible minority racialized Canadians across the board. It's not just our disability that poses barriers when we're looking for jobs. When I face tremendous disadvantage when I enter a room, in many spaces and places, and it's on two fronts, by the way. It's in mainstream spaces, and it's also in ethnic and diverse spaces. Because in ethnic and diverse spaces, I'm just a disabled person. And in mainstream places, I'm that racialized person with a disability. When I walk into certain places, people assume, oh, maybe she's here for settlement assistance or link classes. You know, David and I have an advantage over a lot of people. We listen real hard and we don't pass judgment on what people look like. But the sighted world does pass judgment on us. They don't hear us. They don't hear that we don't sound any different. Or that we talk the same talk and walk the same walk, but face these tremendous disadvantages because of the way we might visibly appear to people. So when people tell me they don't see color, that color doesn't matter, my joke is, well, then you must be blinder than I am, because you should be seeing my color. My color is very real. And you're not colorless either. And we need to recognize that. And we need to level the playing field for everybody. So legislative work that needs to be done needs to take into consideration the diverse realities of Canadians with disabilities across this wonderful country that we all call home. Accessibility is a starting point. Inclusion is the goal. And accessibility cannot be achieved if it is not deeply embedded in our equity work. So let's go beyond basic standards that put bricks and mortar on, that put certain guidelines, and truly look at our intentions of how we foster inclusion going forward. If I have said something that anybody feels uncomfortable with, I apologize for that discomfort, but I hope you will reflect upon it and consider what I'm saying as an opportunity to learn, grow, and develop and foster the change that we dare to seek. Thank you.
Rabia, for sharing your perspective. Diversity is a strength for Canada, and I think it's really important that we do bring diverse perspective, diverse vision to any stage so we can create inclusive policies. Because an act is an act, but how you're going to implement it really matters. If you engage all Canadians, and many of the Canadians, as you see, they are immigrants, they are persons of colors, and if their voices are not included in the implementation plan, then you will be creating policies and procedures which will benefit only partial Canadians. As the Canadian demographics are changing, we must create policies that are inclusive for not just for an individual culture or a Western culture, but a collective culture where families are an integral part of individuals' progress. So thank you, David. Thank you, Rabia. I really enjoyed hearing both of your perspectives. In just a few minutes, we will start a 10 minutes break. During this time, please take time to submit a question or questions for the candidates by filling out the question submission forms that was placed on your seats. And there is staff at the registration to accept the forms and provide assistance to anybody who may need help in writing. So thank you so much. Enjoy your day. There are refreshments at the back. Please have some refreshments and then proceed.
You've got to feel on either side of the filler.